Well, we're back. Welcome. This is the MULTIVAC podcast, and we've got a very special guest with us today, which I'll introduce very shortly. But we are back after about a 6-month plus gap. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for sticking with us, and hopefully you get a lot out of the session today. As I say, my name's Elliot Chrisp, so I lead the materials side of MULTIVAC, and we have Chris with us from MULTIVAC as well.
Yeah, I'm Chris Howard. I was on the last one. I'm the product sales manager for MULTIVAC, so managing the product development managers and our lovely marketing department as well, who unfortunately can't be with us today.
And the big one, so we have a lovely special guest, which is Alice.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice to be here. Very impressive. I like it lots.
Thank you for being here. It's hopefully we've got a lot to go through today. So and we are in the new showroom. Are we calling it showroom, Chris?
No, it's we're
Innovation Centre.
Yes,
sorry, I got that wrong.
We're trying to change the name from a showroom to the Innovation Centre, because obviously what we want to try and do is have the customers come here on a journey. So a journey of NPD, new product development. So we've got the new chiller room where we can do all of the processing equipment, package it. We can bring it into our lovely supermarket here, test the products on the shelf, and then take it through over to our left over here where we've got our new test kitchen as well. So it's that full journey of product development, testing and tasting.
Tailor-making that package and that whole process for a customer. It's really cool, actually. We're actually having an event, aren't we, to launch it?
Yes, so we've had it every 2 years. I think it's our Oktoberfest event, right. And then this year we're doing something special. So we're going to have the first day, which is going to be a staff event. So we've got some of our big senior directors coming from Germany over to open up the new Innovation Centre, and then we'll have the staff here for the first day, and then a customer event on the Wednesday and Thursday, and that's on the 20th and 21st of September. For the customers. So it'll be product running, equipment running, demonstrations, and then the Oktoberfest event in the evening with fun and games.
So if you're not already signed up, there's your cue to get signed up and come and have a look at the new Innovation Centre.
Exactly.
So that brings us on to Alice. Alice, OPRL. So you're doing an event as well, aren't you?
We are.
At the end of September.
Yeah. We're going to London Packaging Week. So I better explain who I am and what we are, just to give a bit of an introduction.
Yes, please do. Let's get into it.
A lot of people say OPRL, what does that mean? So it stands for the On-Pack Recycling label. So we are the company behind, bear with me 1 second, these labels that you might see on your packaging.
Okay.
So these labels tell you, when you're at home, what you should do with that packaging when you've finished with it. So whether you can recycle it, whether you can't recycle it, or whether you have to do something different with it. And that's effectively what our organisation is all about. We work with people like yourselves, with retailers and brands, with packaging manufacturers, all sorts of different suppliers to help to understand what's going to happen to that packaging once it's been finished with. And obviously we don't just kind of sit in a room and think, well, we like that one, so we'll say yes to that one, or we don't like that one. We have a series of questions that we ask about a piece of packaging to help us decide whether it's going to be recycled. So first of all, we want to know, is that going to be collected?
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, that's just our household recycling that we have at home. You might have a bin or a box, and you just throw everything in. So that's great. There's a collection for it. We can tick that box. We can answer that question, yes. Then we want to know, how are they going to be able to sort those materials out? So can they take the plastic away from the metal, from the paper? Can they separate those out and send them off to the reprocessors to be turned back into something else? And if we can say yes to that question, great. And then the last thing we need to ask is, so it's going to be collected, it can be sorted, reprocessed, what's it going to be turned into?
So is it going to be recycled?
Exactly.
Right, okay.
And from our point of view, it's not about whether it's coming back into packaging, it's just that there's a viable end market for it. So not all packaging comes back into packaging, some of it will go off into agriculture, automotive industry, all sorts of different places. But as long as there's that viable end market, then we can say, yes, it's going to be recycled, we can give it a recycle label. And obviously there will be places where we have to answer no to that question. So there will be some materials that actually not many local authorities can collect.
Okay.
So we can't give it a recycle label. We have to say to the consumer, sorry, you can't recycle it. So it needs a don't or a do not recycle label on there. And then there's a kind of a middle ground, which actually is quite relevant for quite a few of the materials that you guys do, isn't it?
This is why, yeah, it is, yes.
So there are some materials where it's not going to be collected through the household recycling. We have to do something different as a consumer. So when you've finished with your packaging, you have to take it somewhere else for the collection to happen. And that is the case for a lot of plastic films. And it's because the local authorities don't yet have the collection available for plastic films. We can't put them in the household recycling collection yet. We've got to take them somewhere else. And for a lot of cases, that's you take them back to the supermarket. You might see those big kind of bins or containers at the front.
Yeah, I saw one at the weekend where it said soft plastics only.
That's
so
it.
Crisp packets,
Yeah.
films,
Exactly.
things like that.
Yeah.
All of those things, exactly. And you take those back to the supermarket, and we know then from that point on, all the other questions are going to be answered yes, and those materials will get recycled.
Which is, so this is why I really want you on the show, because OPRL, to me, is like a household name. Like you say OPRL, I know exactly what you mean. And for all of our customers, that's not always the case, which I find quite crazy, because OPRL has such a big influence on the packaging industry and the food industry and the consumer. And you all use this on a day-to-day basis. You will look at the back of the pack, look at the green label, look at the black label, and immediately have that engagement with it. Yet we need to increase the understanding of what OPRL does in the background to get to that point.
Yes, although I would say that, you know, I speak to loads of people, you know, even trying to describe to my family what I do. I would never say I work for OPRL. I would say I'm the person who helps retailers and brands put those recycling labels on packaging, because that's the bit that people see. And I guess, is it important that people know who OPRL are? No, but it's important they understand what the labels mean.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's and that they trust the labels. So we've done some consumer research, and we know that when we speak to people, they understand what our labels mean. You know, 75% of people know exactly what that recycle label means and what they need to do, which is really important. Particularly when you see that sometimes there's other labels on packaging, recycling labels on packaging. People make assumptions they know what it means, but they don't, and it can get really confusing.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons why people don't recycle is because they're confused. They don't understand what should be going where. So anything we can do to help that and make it easier for people is really helpful. It's
a really important subject, isn't it, to get that message, which is such a complicated message.
Definitely.
As simple as possible, and it's really difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation with my husband the other day. He's got a bit of a bugbear going on at the moment about cartons or boxes, as we like to call them in our house. And he picked up a cereal box and he said, "Why have they got carton on the label? It's a box. Why are they calling it a box?" And this is exactly right. You know, we live in our little packaging bubbles, maybe not so much you, but, you know, we live and breathe packaging day to day. And if I said to you, "Oh, yeah, it's a fibre carton," you'd know exactly what I meant. And if I said that to you, you might go, "What?" Yeah. Exactly. So we've got to remember that when we're communicating with the customer, which is basically us, isn't it? How do we make it simple and straightforward for everyone to understand?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
really important.
Yeah. And then for our role, when we work together, we're trying to interpret those guidelines, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And then what it means for myself, for plastic polymer choices or material choices, because you don't just look at plastics, you look at paper, glass, and beyond, metals and every material for every different type of packaging. That's not just food packaging either.
No,
it's much more broader range than that.
Yeah.
So for us, it's quite a niche specialist subject, and then I've got to then interpret that for Chris and for his team and machinery, and how that influences down MULTIVAC equipment, which is quite a big thing to get right, really, because then we've got to send that message back to the customer, who then goes back to the supermarket, who then goes back to the consumer. So, and I think it's so important.
I think, you know, I agree with you that I don't know as much as I can know when it comes to OPRL and recycling and materials. But for instance, we're looking at sustainability here in MULTIVAC UK. And one of the things, so with our tray sealer product manager, one of the things he's investigating is how can we use mono materials more for trays? Yeah. And it's things like that. But then it's understanding, okay, so what is mono going to give us in terms of a tray, into recycling, into collection and things like that, so that we can piece the jigsaw together. Yeah. So I think that we the non-materials type people need to understand more to make our lives and jobs easier for our customers.
Absolutely. And there's always such a conflict, isn't there? You know, I'm looking at it purely from a recyclability point of view.
Yeah.
And I might say, well, the best thing you want from a recyclability point of view is this material, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't give you the functionality that you need. So there's always going to be kind of like a trade-off and a compromise. And it's about finding what's going to give you the best solution. Definitely, that's the important bit.
Okay.
You've had some new labels come out.
We have.
Which try and make it even more simple and clear for people at home.
Yeah, so the label itself, the message is still the same. It's still kind of recycle or do not recycle. What we're trying to help people do is put their recycling out in the best way, shall we say. Sounds a bit complicated, but it's about how we can improve the quality of that material. So we have things like the rinse or the clean message that we can put on the label, and that's to tell you that you need to make sure your recycling is clean before you put it back in the, you know, the container. They don't want yogurt pots that have half got yogurt left in them, or baked beans dropping all over everything.
So Alice, when you say they, just explain that a little bit.
Yes. So by they, what we mean is obviously the reprocessors and the waste management companies. If you have containers that have still got loose food in them, let's say, once that goes into your bin, first of all, it's likely to fall off onto all the other recycling that's in your bin.
Yeah.
And then it will go through the sorting process and you'll get baked beans going everywhere, and, you know, it'll end up at the reprocessors and everything's covered in bean juice. It's just not going to be very nice. And also it makes your bins stink, let's be honest. Stinky bins are not nice.
No,
I was going to say,
they're not. I like...
I was going to say with the hot summer, but I don't really feel like we've had a hot summer, so it's not been such an issue this year, has it? But yeah, so there's that reason. And then so what we also want to do is we want to make sure we're helping people. There we go. Well, that will count. So it's about making sure you're getting rid of the food residue or eating the icing off the bands, definitely. And then other things, so like foil, for example. Okay. Foil quite often is quite small and can be quite difficult to be captured. So when our material gets taken, our recycling material gets taken, one of the first things they do is they put it through this big rotating drum. It's called a trommel screen. And there's holes in the drum, and anything that's small falls through those holes. So what we want to do is try and stop the foil from being too small and make sure it doesn't. So now we have a message for people to scrunch their foil. And actually, if you've got lots of small bits of foil, we say it's really good to scrunch it all together, because then you're making a big ball of foil.
And that then won't fall through.
Exactly. Goes through and gets captured.
So it's all about capture. It's all about helping the reprocessors and the sorting houses that are the first part of the recycling process to get hold of that material, give it its best chance of being captured and then repurposed.
And like you said, you know, people are working really hard to create materials that are more recyclable. Yeah. If we're not actually be able to get them through the process, and all that hard work's for nothing. So what can we do to help that, basically?
Okay.
I think there's a big frustration on what comes first, the recycling capabilities or the recyclable film. It's a bit like this chicken and the egg, and it's always this play-off. And I always tell people, well, why would someone invest in loads of kit and investment to recycle something if it doesn't already exist? But I get the frustration, and it's a real hard middle ground for yourself, isn't it? To try and bridge that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is really difficult. And, you know, the thing that I said about the questions that we ask. So when we're looking at whether there's a collection available for people, we need to know, because we're a UK scheme, our labels have to operate across the UK. So we need to know that that collection's available by 75% of the local authorities. And obviously when you... There has to be a point where innovation has got to be able to happen, but we might not always be the ones to be able to be there straight from the beginning. You know, it's going to take a bit of time before that infrastructure builds up. Although having said that, this might lead us very nicely into what's going on the kind of EPR side and the regulations that are coming in.
That's a big subject, obviously, that we can cover. Is there any update on EPR? What's your latest? I always tap you up for the information, so we're going to do this live.
First off, have you heard about EPR? Do you know what it stands for?
No, but refresh my memory.
Okay, so EPR is called Extended Producer Responsibility. And effectively what it means is that the producers of packaging, which primarily are the kind of the retailers and brands, as in the producers of packaging on the market, are going to be paying for, ultimately, the reprocessing of that packaging.
Okay.
That's the nuts and bolts of it.
Yep.
It's more complicated than that, but essentially that's what it means. So what's going to happen is that this is coming in from next year onwards, various levels. And there's going to be a lot of information gathering. People have got to start reporting on what packaging they're producing. And then they will be paying certain fees based on the packaging they're producing, but also the recyclability of the packaging.
Okay.
So if you have a really recyclable piece of packaging, you will pay less than if you had a less recyclable or a not recyclable piece of packaging. Alongside all of that, there is mandatory labelling for recycling, which obviously I'm really pleased about.
Yes.
So every piece of household packaging, every piece of consumer packaging, whether it's grocery, non-grocery, doesn't matter, has got to have a label on it to say whether it's recyclable or not.
And that is going to be the OPRL labels.
Yeah, so the swoosh and the words recycle or do not recycle. So it's going to be consistent. So everything will have the same label. We'll see the same thing, which is really, really helpful. So that's really good news. The thing with the other exciting thing that kind of runs alongside, I can't believe I'm saying exciting about government legislation, but there we go. And this is about ensuring that every household and eventually business in the UK will have the same set of materials collected. So it doesn't matter where you live, where I live, where you live.
Which varies so much at the moment.
Absolutely. We will all have the same basic set of materials collected from our house. And that will include plastic films.
Oh, okay.
So you will no longer have to take your plastic films back to the supermarket. You will be able to put some of your plastic films in your household recycling collection.
Great news, isn't it?
So for us and for many people at home where they buy, let's use mints as the example, you know, in the classic rigid tray, that tray can be recycled at home, but the top, you have to do something different with it. It might be recyclable, take it back to the supermarket. Going forward, the hope and the plan is to have all of that at curbside, at home, at the convenience.
Exciting.
A huge move that's needed to happen. Customers who are then getting asked about from their customers. So, right, I'll start off by a nice easy one for you to begin with. So, are OPRL rules law or simply guidelines?
I wish they were law, but they're not. Not yet. So we are a voluntary scheme. So you know, it's a decision that people make to put the labels on their packaging. Having said that, the labelling rules that we have, we are quite prescriptive on. If you took a multi-material piece of packaging and stuck a recycle label on it, obviously we wouldn't be very happy because you're giving the wrong information to the consumer, and that's not what the scheme is about.
What goes on that moment? I'm chopping in with another question now because I've always wondered about this. I can walk around a supermarket and spot it. You know, what happens if someone gets a label wrong?
So we have an audit scheme. So we audit all our retailer and brand members. So where the labels are going to appear on packaging and consumers are going to see them. So we are auditing those to say, right, how are you using the labels and are you using it correctly? And for us, the correctly is not just about, are you saying the right message, but also it's about how are you using that label, the look of the label.
Okay.
You know, have you suddenly stuck it in a weird font and bright pink or something, and it's going to be something that people don't recognise. it's really important that we maintain that look and feel, because that's what people understand.
That's like the familiarity,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
yeah.
Okay.
So we do have, it's not going around supermarkets, but we do have an auditing team who are constantly checking packaging artwork to make sure the labels are correct.
I'm really sad. I can't help it. I can walk around somewhere and just spot it.
You haven't
And then
sent me any photos of it
Alice,
yet.
what's going on with this? But then you don't want to call people out. So it's often people think it is law, but it isn't, is it?
It isn't.
It's a guideline to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. But, EPR, mandatory recycling labelling, is coming.
Yeah.
So there will be a law that says you have to label your packaging that's going to the consumer. And that will have that swoosh, the words recycle, do not recycle.
Yeah.
The kind of determination of the recyclability. So it will be similar to what we do at the moment in terms of asking those questions about a piece of packaging. Can it be collected? Can it be sorted? Can it be reprocessed? Is there an end market for that? But it will go further, because they will be looking at what's the most recyclable and what's the least recyclable. And that's not something that the label would ever differentiate on.
Yeah.
The label is there purely as a piece of consumer information. It's to tell you when you get home, what do I do with this packaging?
Where do I put it? What do I do?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But so that sort of brings us on to our next question about EPR. So this is probably my most common question that I get. What's the latest? I know we picked on it a bit earlier, but what is the latest news with EPR?
So the latest news with EPR is that there has been a slight delay. So they have pushed back the payment of the fees. They haven't pushed back the reporting of the data. So if you
Important point that.
Absolutely critical. If you are placing packaging on the UK market, you have to start reporting your data, and you have to be doing it now, basically. The other thing that they are doing currently, so they've pushed back the payment of the fees. There is a consultation out at the moment on the regulations, which I have got in my bag if you wanted to have a quick skim through of the 120 pages.
Yes, please.
Bedtime reading. Yeah.
So there's a consultation out on the regulations that talk about things like the labelling, that talk about the producer responsibility, that talk about all sorts of different things about how the scheme's going to be managed, and the reporting, and a hell of a lot.
So that's
basically
going through the consultation for review at the moment.
So it's out for consultation, and the closing date is sometime in the middle of October. So not a huge amount of time to get a response into that. There's a lot of work being done by the different trade association groups. Inkpen are really heavily involved.
Okay.
So if you want more information, there are organisations who are reading through it and looking at what possible responses might be. So you can certainly reach out to those, and they can help you.
Okay.
So so that's being consulted on. And then hopefully what will happen is they'll take everyone's feedback, and they'll come back and they'll reconfirm next dates and what's happening.
Okay. Am I allowed to ask if you think it's going to get knocked back again?
Oh, well, you can ask.
You don't have to answer. It's okay.
No, I mean, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because, we saw with DRS in Scotland, they kept saying up until the very day, virtually, it's going to happen. Oh, no, we've pushed it back. So, I don't think I'd ever say that I don't think government are going to push back. I hope they don't. I think EPR is a really exciting opportunity. I think it's got such potential for us to really start improving recycling rates, particularly in England. We've been so stagnant, haven't we, for such a long time. And I think we really need to take this opportunity. My worry is that the current government, shall we say, doesn't have quite the focus that maybe I do have on it.
Yeah, okay. It needs to happen, doesn't it, to give us that kickstart, that catalyst.
Yeah.
And let's be fair, when you financially incentivise change, generally happens anyway, doesn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And just to link into what part of the other subject, so with the labels, do you think consumers actually take note of the labels? And do you actually do any marketing to see the engagement level to do with the labels? Yeah,
so we've done consumer research since we started, actually. So we started going in 2009. And we've been asking consumers about what they understand about the labels. Not just are they seeing them. Obviously, when we started, not many people were using them. But now we've got over 750 members. So we've got a huge presence, particularly in the grocery sector, more so. Yeah. But people are seeing the labels. But the important question we ask them is not only have you seen it, but do you understand what it means, and are you acting on it? And 3/4 of the people that we ask say yes, they see it, they understand it, and they act on it. So they know what they need to do when they see that label. So that's really critical for us.
Do you split that into demographics of age groups? And do you see anything where, say, the younger generation aren't really taking any notice of it? Or is it more the older generation?
I wouldn't say that it's not they're taking any notice. What we tend to find is actually the older generation are a lot more confident about what they're doing. So they're very confident. When you ask them about, are you confident about what you should and shouldn't recycle? They say, yes, I'm absolutely confident. If you then compare that with actually what they should be collecting or recycling in their area, it doesn't always match up. So sometimes there's this confidence, as in, there was some news about wish cycling recently. People are confident, they're putting in what they think they should be recycling, but they might not actually be doing the right thing.
Right, okay.
Whereas with the younger generations, we tend to see they're just a bit more confused. They're really keen. They really want to do the right thing. They're very aware of what's going on with the environment and with climate change, but they are a bit more worried about getting it wrong, basically. So they're maybe a little bit more hesitant than some of the older generations.
Does that stop them from doing it?
Sometimes it can do. Okay. And that's where having a label on the packaging, that's the other thing we've asked people is, where do you get that information from for your recycling? And a huge number of people now are looking on pack. There is an expectation that, you go for your storage information, your nutritional information, everything is on pack. The expectation is also that recycling information will be on pack too. Okay. So those labels, they help, reduce that confusion, absolutely.
I just find it with my children, it's just sheer laziness. They just put it in the bin. So
I've got it drilled into my too.
One bin. Yeah, I imagine in your household, Alice, that's going to be...
Everything, they ask the question.
Yeah, about 15 separate bins just for everything.
Poor kid's just sweating, just thinking about finishing his packet of crisps,
isn't it? Wrong.
What's mum going to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
That engagement levels, a really important question, because return to supermarket collection points been really useful, especially in our products. All flexible packaging now has a place to be recycled and then taken, recycled and sorted, which is huge. However, the engagement levels are not as high, are they?
No.
And I often get criticised, well, what's the point?
Yeah, and it is really tricky. I mean, I've worked in recycling for many, many years now, and every time you ask someone to do something first, it can be a barrier. It can be something that puts people off. But the reason why we've got this return to store route is because it's a stopgap, really. It's kind of like a stepping stone while we wait for the household recycling of films to come in. So it's given us this opportunity to get these films collected and get the films recycled. And I know that retailers are doing a huge amount to push the collections. I've seen adverts on the telly for them. And people like Recycle Now and the UK Plastics Pact, they're doing a lot of campaigns as well. So it will build, if you think back to the days when household recycling collections first introduced, recycling rates were really low, but now it's the norm. It's what we all do. So it will build. And then, a few years down the line, we'll be putting films in our household recycling anyway. And then you'll be taking your bottles back to the store for the deposits instead. Yeah,
that's a whole other subject.
Absolutely.
That sort of brings another question to my mind, and Chris wanted to ask this. What are the government doing to boost those recycling rates? So there's a theory, isn't there, that the current local authority contracts don't permit or don't have built into them soft plastics. That's why we're in this position.
Yeah.
What, from your point of view, do you see the government doing to increase those recycling rates?
So I think they're addressing it on kind of 3 levels. So EPR, they see as a big one. So extended producer responsibility will put money into the system, which then allows the local authorities to build up the kind of infrastructure. Well, not the local authorities, but the waste management companies. The infrastructure is set up, and that feeds into the consistency in recycling, which means that we all have the same set of materials collected, whether you're at home, whether you're at work, whether you're in a business, wherever. So you've got the same set of materials being collected, a good quantity of material being collected, being funded through EPR. It's going to be a real boost to the whole system. And then on top of that, which it's not quite the way I would have done it, to be honest, they're introducing deposit return schemes as well.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's focusing obviously primarily on drinks containers and making sure that the value is recovered for those.
And this isn't something I have a lot of knowledge about, the DRS scheme, because it wouldn't affect a lot of our day-to-day products that I often get talked about or talk about. However, this one blew my mind because this is how it used to be done, right? So the old glass bottle returns.
Yeah.
But now drinks bottles are, what are they, 10p, 20p or something like that?
It will
is
be
the plan?
20p, I think, is the starting, well, provisionally, is the starting rate. But then you think about, when the Corona man used to come round, we didn't have recycling at home. You had a bottle bank maybe down at Sainsbury's. I think the first bottle bank came in 1977 or something. So we had the metal bin and the Corona man and your milk bottles that went out on the step.
Yeah.
That was for the milkman to collect again, wasn't it? Reused.
So that was the recycling that we had.
Yeah.
Now we have a system at home where we are already putting loads of material in to be recycled, and we're adding in an extra one as well, which could, I think, lead to some complications.
Yeah, well, that's a whole new debate, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is. I'm trying to read these ones because I've got a couple more.
What is the government doing to boost the recycling rates in the UK?
So those 3 bits of legislation: extended producer responsibility, consistency in recycling, and the deposit return scheme.
They're the main
Those are the
ones.
3 things that they see are going to be fundamental in improving. And also you've got to remember, or you don't have to remember, but recycling rates are recorded by nation. So actually, when you look at people like Wales, for example, their recycling rate is kind of mid 60%. They are doing way better than England and Scotland and Northern Ireland. So there's work that they've done there that has meant that they've kind of jumped ahead already. England has very much been static and it's just staying around the same level.
Where are the England levels? Wales is 60%.
We're about 44, I think.
44, and then Scotland.
I don't know.
Don't know, but that's quite a big difference, isn't it, between the two.
Wales
nations.
are definitely streets ahead of the others.
So I used to live in North Wales, and I've always found, even 15, 20 years ago, their recycling schemes or the curbside was way, way better than what I get now in England. Yeah. Wow.
They've invested in a lot of it's called single stream collection. So you'll have a different container for different materials.
That was it. And they had food waste as well.
And you'll have a food waste collection.
So it was very much more expansive than it is in England.
So more bins,
yes,
but more clear on what goes in what.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a cardboard bin, a plastics bin, a general, and then food waste as well.
And the benefit of doing it that way is that if you're keeping your cardboard separate from everything else, you won't get baked beans on it. You won't get yogurt splatters. Yeah. You've got a really good quality of material that you're collecting. So my poor family, we went on holiday to Tenby last week, and it was recycling day when we were there. And I was there with them. I was like, come on, let's read what the bags say. What are we putting where? I was so excited about it.
Wow.
I know. It's the little
planned
things.
It, didn't you, that day?
Well, living the dream. That's what it's all about.
What do you want to be when you grow up? Brilliant. I've got a bit more of a technical question.
Okay.
So mono polyesters, so mono-base webs, trays. Chris, if you hold one up, and what I'm talking about, mono tray. Okay, so mince packs, meat packs, these sort of things. Big push to go to mono, get a green label on it, nice and easy. But there's certain products that we know struggle to move away from that sealing layer PE.
Yeah.
So OPRL recognised this, put a new temporary rule in to say less than 10% PE on mono rPET, we can class as recyclable to the end of 2024.
Yes.
And do you think that is going to be extended, or do you think that will remain in place as a hard stop?
So I don't think that we will make any further changes until we know any more about what's going to happen with the kind of recyclability levels through EPR.
Right, okay.
So there is a chance that it could be extended. It depends on how that kind of recyclability assessment level works and where that comes in. Because really, that's what EPR and the modulated fees will do. Like you said, it's money that's going to drive the change. So if you've got a mono PET tray and you're paying a lower fee than you would do if you've got a PET tray that's got a PE sealing layer. Then you might actually think, well, depending what the difference is, but you might think about how are we going to try and make that change. So until we've got that information through EPR, we won't be making any further changes to those.
Okay. It's quite an important one because there's a certain set of products that really struggles on monopolyesters or slows the production of the lines down, and that can really kill a business from the throughput. So it's good to know that that's in place for a while now, because that gives us a chance to build off that.
And conversations like that we are having for other packaging formats as well. It's been, we have the same sets of conversations about, I would say, probably 5 packaging formats that are the troublesome ones. Now that everyone's made as much of a change as they can, we're coming down to this small set of materials where the product has got certain requirements that it's really hard to meet with any other packaging format. And people are trying and they're working really hard, but let's face it, what with COVID and then with everything that's going on financially at the moment, it's not an ideal time, really. It hasn't been great, has it, to kind of like...
Not to get the innovation and the time on lines and the testing that's needed to push this. It's not just a packaging change, it's a whole production change. It's a massive process. So that brings me on to a final question quite neatly, is should our customers be designing for the current set of guidelines? Because we know it's an ever-changing process, especially on flexibles and mono rigid trays and things. Or should they be focusing on what potentially could be in the future?
That's a really good question. That's probably quite a tricky one to answer, isn't it? I mean,
that's why I finished with it.
Well done. I mean, I guess the way things are going is that, and particularly with the modulated fees that comes in, you will pay a lower fee if you've got a more recyclable material. And so that's where the monos come in, obviously, where if you can reduce your barrier layers, I know it's not always easy, that's what's going to improve the recyclability, and so therefore bringing the fee down. So I guess if it was me, I would be trying to look for those kind of what's coming in the future, but being mindful that that's not always possible at the moment, and there will be, a way to accommodate that. It just might have a bit of a financial difference to start with. So
the main message is push for mono as much as possible. Look at the guidelines, see where you think you can get into mono with a backup plan, thinking about EPR in the background. Get the right advice to be able to say, okay, in the future it's going to be maybe look at this, but at the moment look for mono and push for that as much as you possibly can.
I think so. And obviously what we're doing in the UK is one thing, but we're seeing those changes happening at a European level as well. They're really pushing things forward there. So it's not just the UK market. I think it's across the board that people will be pushing that forward.
All right, thanks for those questions, Alice. I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of the listeners will get a lot of information, a lot of good info from that. So that's great. And Chris. Sorry.
Don't forget me.
Never forget you, Chris. So I wanted to look at a bit of a trend that we're certainly seeing in the industry, which is what I'm dubbing lightweighting. So previously, the classic would be to down gauge a bit of plastic and maybe save 20% on your plastic content. What we've been really seeing is like big down gauging. So focusing on lightweighting. So taking away as much. So Chris, if you bring the samples up of what the existing pack is, for example, so like a mono rigid polyester tray. Packaging can be anything from chicken pieces, as you see there. If you're listening, there's a MAP pack that, ready to eat sort of pack, chicken pieces. Or mince. Mince is the classic one. And everyone knows about the mince project that recently happened, going from big trays, traditional big trays like this, into the smaller vacuum packaging, flexible packaging. So to bring that round into an OPRL standpoint, we've gone from a rigid collection at curbside pack, apart from the top web, into a pack that's now returned to supermarkets. Right, and it's a huge trend that we're seeing. Chris, if you bring up the mince packs and the other ones, and the other way of doing it is to then maybe replace the polyester with a paper or something to keep the rigidity, but reduce the amount of plastic involved.
Yeah.
And is this something that you're seeing quite a lot as well, inquiries with customers and things?
Yeah, hugely. And I would say, you know, in some instances, people are even going further and looking to remove plastic altogether to replace it with a different material. And this is where I have a bit of a struggle. And I think it's because from OPRL, we look at it purely from the point of view of recyclability. And you're right, you know, I look at this and think, oh, this is lovely and nicely recyclable and I can stick it in my bin at home. I look at this and I think, oh, well, that's a little bit more complicated because as we've said.
So like the flexible mince pack is more complicated.
Because it involves the consumer doing something else because they've got to, you know, if it's a recyclable packaging, they still have to take it back to the supermarket. And we know that can be a bit of a barrier and put people off.
Sure.
But that's me looking at it from the recyclability lens. And these decisions are not made from recyclability, are they? You know,
it's one element of
exactly.
it. Yeah. It's definitely a big driver of it now. It never used to be, but it certainly is probably the main driver. Yeah. Or we can reduce your plastic content. And the next question is it recyclable? And if it isn't, it's normally a no, that the project's not going to go anywhere.
So strangely enough, so a lot of the conversation, I'm learning a lot through what we're discussing. But I did a study on the flexible mince pack myself, actually. And not only is it a reduction in the plastic and the weight, but I also looked into the CO2 emissions in manufacturing it, the transportation, because obviously you get a lot more mince packs on a pallet when you're delivering it to the store. And when you looked at all of that, it makes a huge, huge difference. However, when I discussed it with my wife, she was like, oh, yeah, that's great. You know, we're reducing plastics, we're saving the planet, et cetera, et cetera. And then she went, oh, is it recyclable? And I went, no. And she's like, and then it just turned her off the whole packaging concept completely.
And that is really difficult because, you know, a lot of these decisions are being made for this huge amount of work and effort going into making the right decisions. How you then communicate that to the consumer in a really straightforward, simple, easy to understand way that doesn't bamboozle them and explains the reasons for doing everything is really, really tricky. I mean, we've seen examples recently of people who have moved from what I would class as an ideally recyclable, you know, it might be a plastic bottle, for example, and they've gone into a multi-material container instead.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
And, you know, we see other examples of people moving to kind of paper-based bottles, but the fibre content is only about 50%. And from my point of view, I'm thinking, hang on, I don't get that. I don't understand the reasons.
Because you understand the technicalities of it.
Yes.
And the back the back process of why that isn't the best ideal choice. However, from a consumer point of view, looks great, doesn't it?
Yeah,
on the shelf.
But I understand it from a recyclability point of view. I have to be honest, I don't know about the carbon impact of various different things, you know, or even the water impact. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about the water impact. And so there's a huge amount behind it all that we don't necessarily know or see. I don't know whether we need to understand it all, but I do think we're missing a trick in some instances of really kind of shouting about why we've made these decisions and why we're making these changes. I do think there is a bit of a trend in some instances. There has been an anti-plastic trend. You know, we do know there are some groups out there who are very anti-plastic.
Yeah.
And I don't think they help.
They certainly don't help because they certainly don't always look at the facts.
Yes.
Of a holistic approach.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, you know, that information gets to the consumer as well, and that doesn't help. So it's quite tricky in that respect, making it clear.
It's really hard when you look at one of these projects because we know base webs of a mince tray, highly recyclable product, highly recycled content product as well, really important. But then when we really look at the sums and the maths on and take the mince project as an example, Chris, what are we talking about? Some of the statistics are unbelievable. Is it 8,000 tons of CO2 saved a year?
Yeah, about 8,000 tons.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
And that's just from that's not just the plastic reduction, because that comes in somewhere around the 50-60% mark, depending on what you measured it previously to. But that is transport. So you get more emissions from the trucks. So less trucks on the road, less shelf space, improved shelf life, which often doesn't get talked about.
So you've got a CO2 data that's connected with producing the beef. So it's around about 60 kilograms of CO2 per 1 kilo of producing beef.
Wow.
So when you take that into the food waste, because with the flexible pack, you're increasing it from 7 days to 14 days, and in some instances 21 days.
Yeah.
So you're spanning 2 weekends
Which
in a
is
supermarket
huge.
shelf.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So you've got more opportunity for the consumer to buy it, so you're wasting less. And when you add up all of those figures, it is huge. But I also think that there's an element of everybody trying to be carbon neutral or net zero carbon. And I think that's helping the recycle industry as well. And it's helping OPRL, I think, as well, because everybody's looking at CO2 and everybody's looking at sustainability. And that all ties in with the materials that we're using.
Yeah, I agree. I guess part of me thinks that we need to go further as an industry and explain to people that net zero is not just about recyclability.
No, exactly.
It's about these other things as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that we all need to do. I think, and probably government too need to really we need to start talking about that more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it has to be easy, doesn't it? It has to be
Yes.
easy for use. So like take the paper, we were talking about this offline a little bit. The paper can be when it's got the plastic covering, because we need the plastic. It's really important to remember we need the plastic in our type of products, protein type products, with a lot of water content. You can't just put paper around that. That's just going to disintegrate in 2 seconds. And the plastic really does increase shelf life. So you're talking 7 days to 14 to 21 days. That's really why packaging is there, not just as a dust cover. But the functionality is a really important part. So the paper products look lovely on the shelf, don't they? They look fantastic. But sometimes the plastic is really hard to separate. And if the plastic isn't separated, recyclability goes out the window.
Yeah.
So I know that you've got a lot of guidelines on plastic, paper sort of ratios and separation and things.
Absolutely. Yeah, the critical thing for us is, if that material, let's say, if that's going to a fibre reprocessor, they want to have a good quantity, of fibre out of that. Because if they're paying for a tonne of material and only 40% of that tonne is fibre, then they're paying for 60% of something that they've got to throw away.
It's a really good point.
Which is, it's just not viable. It's never going to work if you're doing it that way. So it is, but at the same time, like you said, I talk about these barriers. We need to make sure that what we do is easy for the consumer. We always talk about, if you're having to separate a piece of packaging, separate components, can you do it without using some sort of tool, a pair of scissors or a knife?
Yeah.
It needs to be easy and it needs to be straightforward for people.
I think that's why the Mince project has highlighted this, for me anyway, when I was looking at different types of packaging, and when we were going through that process with a customer, paper wasn't the viable option because one, we know it's much more expensive than the plastic option, but two, it's that extra engagement that you have to do, and is it really going to happen? Whereas now, take your mince out, rinse the packaging off, take it back to the supermarket, and it's recyclable. It's only one step. I know you have to go back to the supermarket, but you don't have to separate. Have I got this right? It removes that confusion and makes things a lot simpler.
Yeah.
It just made sense on that one. It's amazing how that project has been the catalyst for this what I'm naming lightweighting. So we're talking, I did some sums the other day where you can take 45% of CO2 out of a pack, your carbon footprint from a pack, just by going from a robust polyester tray into a lighter weight material, and product looks the same and everything. But the problem with that is the packaging looks cheaper.
Yeah.
And that's the issue then you have with the supermarket marketeers and the branding teams, is how do you make something look that is fundamentally looks and feels and tactile is cheaper product, isn't technically a cheaper product, but looks a cheaper product, to then get that on the shelf to then increase or not let sales drop, because that is king in supermarkets.
Yeah.
But I think it's historically, when you look at, like you've touched on it there, so in a flexible packaging, it is more the value range of products. And when you go to the more higher end products, that's when you start getting the paper, a cardboard sleeve, a cardboard label, those sorts of things that make it look high end, and then they charge more for it. Why can't you just go with a lighter weight plastic that all looks the same, but you have different grades of product in there, but it's all reducing the plastic, reducing the weight, and better for the planet.
And then get the message right.
Yeah, exactly.
On the shelf,
Yeah.
that's key.
Yeah.
And the change can happen. You know, if you think about a few years back, we used to have everything in black plastic
Yes.
Yep.
because it looked good. And now we don't. We've moved away from black plastic.
Black is always known now as evil.
Exactly, because it can't be recycled.
Yeah,
You know,
That was overnight as well, wasn't it?
pretty much.
Literally.
So,
yeah.
you know, it's not that the change can't happen. It's just sometimes people get a bit, oh, no, I'm not sure about this to start with. But yeah,
But in one way, I suppose when you had a black tray, you instantly knew you couldn't recycle it. So you didn't need a label on it, did you? So you just go, oh, yeah, it's black, so I'm just going to bin it.
People still put them in.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's a trend that's going to continue.
Yes,
I can't see it going any other way.
I think certainly for the time being, until we have this kind of clarification through the EPR again, as I keep going on about, but I really do think that is going to help with giving us these kind of different recyclability levels for materials. I think that will really help drive people. But still at the same time, that's one part, that's the recyclability. And the net zero element is so important that I do think you're right. The lightweighting, the need to reduce the amount of material that we're using is going to keep pushing on.
Yeah. And of course, the less plastic we use, but the same functionality, the less resource we're using, the less oil that we're using, it's all those knock-on effects. So we're going to look at this in more detail actually at our show, aren't we? At the end of September. So it's the 20th of September, 21st of September, 2 days, and we're going to have each of these packs on. So we're in quite a unique position because we've got a flow wrapper. We've traditionally always done the MAP thermoforming and tray sealing, and then we've got the thermoforming for the flexible vacuum pack as well. So we're going to compare those, aren't we, Chris? And we're going to have a lot of information about lightweighting and what the impact to the environment and sustainability. Yeah,
I like to call it mince 4 ways.
Mince 4 ways. I'm still not keen on that. Brilliant. I'm glad that you're not in marketing. Wait, what? But we're gonna look at that in more depth. So by all means, if you want to learn more, there's 2 days looking at that and really giving customers information on what the benefits are. I definitely see the trend going that way, 100%. And then just to finish up, to thank Alice.
Yes.
For being here.
No
great
problem.
having you.
Really appreciate it. Genuinely, really interesting. And again, you're going to be at the London Packaging Show?
It's called London Packaging Week, which is only Thursday and Friday. So let's gloss over that. 21st and 22nd of September. And actually, there's going to be some people from DEFRA there as well. So if you've got any questions about EPR, they will be there answering questions as much as they can. So yeah, we'll be there too.
Brilliant. Right. Thank you very much. And that is the end of our podcast for the OPRL podcast. Thank you for listening, watching. If you like the content, thumbs up, smash the like button, as the kids say, and follow us. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
See ya.
Bye.